So, what causes children and teenagers to commit violent crimes? Were they born monsters? Should they be tried and sentenced like adults? Or can they be helped? And if so, how? So, these are some of the questions underlying this book, No Matter How Loud I Shout, A Year in the Life of Juvenile Court, which I read at the end of winter retreat, and I just couldn't put it down. And when I did put it down, I just started to cry. And I went to bed at 1 in the morning. So today I'd like to just share with you some thoughts on why I found this book both disturbing and very moving. It's written by a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. His name is Edward Humes, and for 1 year in 1994, he follows what happens to 7 teenagers accused of crimes ranging from murder, armed robbery, and violent assault as they make their way through the Los Angeles juvenile court system. And I guess the book really spoke to my heart because it confirms something that I believe in very deeply, that when we stop seeing people, when we define them by some actions, okay, that we are calling crimes, right? And we decide on that basis that they are irredeemable, actually all of us in society lose out. I really think, because we are so interdependent, yeah, nobody wins when we exclude, dismiss, or punish a group of people with violence, especially not young people, the next generation. So there's a quote in the book from a judge who was the judge of the Manhattan Family Court at that time, and reading it just made my hair stand. And I'll tell you why later. So she's quoted in the book as saying to the New York Times, "I think by age 15, there is a small number of kids who, for whatever deprivations they have suffered, are cooked, as my grandmother would have said. They are gone. Whatever you do is not going to make a difference. I think the solution is to pare down the money we spend on those kids and invest in the vast majority of kids who come from the same environment and are right on the cusp. People will say you are stigmatizing the bad kids. Well, if you have 36 kids in a classroom and 4 are throwing chairs at the teacher, you have to excise them. Otherwise, all will be lost. This is war." So just reading that we are at war with our children, that was extremely hard for me to read because actually I was in this exact situation when I was teaching public school in Singapore in my second year as a school teacher. And I was the form teacher of a class of 17-year-olds, and there were exactly 4 boys who were all mixed up with gangs, and the other 36 just wanted to come to school and study, and they were terrified of these 4 boys. So, it was a tough job. I got to know these boys, and anyhow, what came to mind was one day I remember I came in for the civics and moral education class, which the form teacher is supposed to teach. Yeah, you talk about things like why marriage is important, and I wasn't married, so it was a strange class. Anyhow, I showed up for this class, and already the class is kind of agitated. The discipline master is in the classroom because he's there to cane the ringleader of these boys. Yeah, so in Singapore, you can have corporal punishment in school. Girls do not get caned, but boys can be caned for what are considered serious offenses like vandalism, smoking, theft, because you can't buy cigarettes if you're under the age of 18. So things like that might be a criminal offense if they were older. I remember the school principal saying, well, we have to cane them now before they get caned by the state, because you can also get caned by the state, and it's like a big whip, basically. So anyhow, so that's what happens at the school level. So I remember walking into classroom, right? The discipline master is there to address this discipline issue without forewarning the boy, right? So he's like, what's going on? And of course, the other 3 boys who are part of the gang have to stand up for their gang leader. So the 3 of them are standing and kind of yelling at the discipline master. All 4 of them are standing. The 36 kids are sitting there like, what happened? And me, the form teacher coming in, is like, huh? I thought we were going to have class. So anyhow, in the middle of this ruckus, the discipline master puts the cane down on the teacher's table and continues to argue with the boys. And then the boy who was supposed to be caned saw that, so he goes over and he picks up the cane from the teacher's table. And he starts to mimic the discipline master behind him. So it was actually really quite funny. But so anyway, so he's there mimicking the discipline master. And of course, the discipline master catches on after a while and says, "Give me back the cane." He's not going to give back the cane. So there's this back and forth between them, "Give me back the cane," blah, blah. And finally, the discipline master says, "This boy has a weapon. He's dangerous. We need to evacuate the classroom." So we did. I mean, I was a rookie teacher, right? Who am I to challenge his authority? So yes, we evacuated the classroom, even though we knew he was not going to harm any of us with this cane. So we all went out, evacuated the classroom, and then waited there in the school foyer as the discipline master called the police to deal with this boy. Anyway, eventually he got expelled. So I think till today, I'm still wondering, what did we learn that day in school? You know, was it that we had to protect the school authority at all costs? Like, I'm still confused as to why we couldn't have sat down and talked, right, to a young man who really was just very upset because uh, his father had died and his girlfriend had dumped him and he just didn't know what to do with the anger. Yeah, so the offense he was charged with was he was having this huge rage and he threw a huge trash can and unfortunately it barely missed the vice principal. So he was down for vandalism and possible assault and therefore the school had to take action. And I just felt like the 36 kids and myself were a bit like the collateral damage of this war, apparently, between a punitive school system and a child. So, reading this book brought that back for me, just remembering that when we meet anger with anger, it just doesn't solve anything. It doesn't mean you can go around throwing trash cans at people, but caning the person who did it, I don't see what good that does. And that day clearly was it was clear from that day. So that's a big part of why I cried reading this book, because you could see the toll of a broken system on everybody involved. That's what, to me, this book is about. The judges, the lawyers, the probation officers, the schools, the families, and of course the children. Really, nobody wins. There's no enemy out there, just a lot of afflictions driven by self-centered thought. So there's a nice interview in here with an experienced prosecutor on what he sees as the root of the problem, and he had some thoughts on how to address it. So this is his name is Jim Hickey, I think, and he says he remembers trying a juvenile murder case years ago before a superior court judge downtown, and the case boiled down to one underpaid prosecutor versus one underpaid public defender, with no money for expert witnesses or clerks or researchers. A typical juvenile court scenario then and now. In the same courtroom that day, the judge was hearing motions in a libel case filed by a well-known vacation resort, whose board of directors objected to an article in Penthouse magazine linking the resort's owners to organized crime figures. 6 lawyers, well-dressed and making hundreds of dollars an hour, came to the hearing, backed up by an array of clerks, paralegals, and toadies of all sorts. It seemed really poignant to me, Hickey recalls. Here we were, just the two of us, trying to decide this young man's fate, a capital crime, supposedly the most serious thing our system has to deal with. And here they were, a porn magazine and a spa for the wealthy, with all these resources at work. There was the system's priorities for all to see. In any case, he goes on to point out there is hope in the book. Yeah, a spark of hope here, where there's a program in a particular school that's been working very well. And it's one where so he says, all these young offenders, serious offenders, and in fact, some of the worst kids go to that school, and something special happens. They end up feeding and bathing autistic and wheelchair-bound kids, working with them intensively, having these handicapped folks depending on them utterly. This works a kind of magic. It softens these kids. For the first time in their lives, someone is dependent on them, and it changes them. This program has been going on for 4 years, and there's never been a problem, never anyone neglected or hurt. Rival gang members go there and work together side by side. Sometimes it seems like a miracle. So I was also very moved to read this, what Jim Hickey is really saying is that the kids, they're already tough. They haven't received much love. Showing them the hard end of a stick doesn't change things, but they are taught empathy by caring for others. Yeah. And another probation officer in the book says, most of the kids that she sees, she'll ask them, where are you going to be in 5 years? And they'll tell her, dead, okay? Can I go now? And she says, that's the problem. Most of her kids have no imagination left. They have no play in them, no power to see possibilities beyond the moment. And if you can see no future, if you expect it to be dead by age 21, what's the point of caring about anything? What's the point of having a conscience or feeling sorry for anyone you hurt if you were terminally ill? So Sharon's probationers, like the kids one of the nuns, Catholic nuns works with in the juvenile hall, tell her that all the time. It doesn't matter what they do because they are in essence dead. And this hopelessness, this living death, does not stop in the barrios and ghettos. She and her colleagues hear the same thing from the rich suburban kids, from children of privilege, even from the sons of 2 juvenile court bench officers. This is what makes so many of the kids of juvenile court so incredibly hard, so resistant to reform. This is what concerns Sharon the most. So reading this book also resonated with me when Venerable was speaking at North Idaho College on the power of respect. Yeah, on why many young people are mobilized to carry out acts of violence, whether by joining a group like ISIS or the People's Liberation Army in China back during the Cultural Revolution. A big part of it is that they lack a bigger vision for themselves, as Venerable Jampa was emphasizing the importance of that yesterday. Right? If they don't have a bigger vision, if they don't see a future for themselves, then why should they care about other human beings? And a big part of it is helping them to reconnect with that vision, to start to care for themselves and others. And most unfortunately, I think these groups like ISIS or the PLA gives young people, our street gangs too, right? It gives young people a sense of purpose, belonging, and power, but based on wrong views derived from harming others instead of helping them. So anyhow, reading this book and reflecting on all this just brought me back to how really very deeply that's all we want as human beings, to be connected, to have a greater purpose, to have hope and vision for the future. And what I love most about our Buddhist practice, especially tantric practice, is that it calls upon us to imagine ourselves as Buddhas. Like, what more amazing vision could there be? Yeah, or to visualize the Buddha above the crown of our head, always. Remembering that we and all sentient beings have this potential, regardless of whatever we've done in the past or in this life, we can transform ourselves and our minds. So I wanted to end off with, since the book is titled No Matter How Loud I Shout, it's about being heard. So I thought I would end off reading one of the poems from one of these young people. So this is a boy who was at the time 16 and charged with accomplice to murder, basically being in the wrong place at the wrong time during a gang shooting. And he says, oh, and this Edward Humes too at the start says even he was afraid of going into the writing class that he was holding with these kids, thinking, are these monsters? But then from reading their writing, he just got to know them as people. So these are things I learned when I was growing up. I learned how to take a spray can of paint and write my nombre on the wall. I learned how to make a Walkman's motor into a tattoo machine so that I could get my barrio on my arms and my neck to show how much I love my homeboys. I learned how to sell the weed and the rock. These are the things I learned when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I learned how to take another person's car without a key, how to drive it and sell it, or just leave it somewhere. I learned how to sit down low and look out the windows for the enemy, to see them before they saw me. And finally, when I was growing up, I learned how to load bullets into a gun. I learned how to carry it and aim it. I learned how to shoot at the enemy, to be there for my homeboys no matter what. These are the things I learned when I was growing up. But this is what I want to know. I want to know who is going to teach me how to pick out the right baby carriage for my little girl. Who is going to teach me how to make up a bottle, or to change a diaper, or to buy baby food? Who is going to teach me how to be a father, how to take care of my family, how to live a life, a normal life? These are the things I never learned growing up. Who will teach me now? So in the book, this boy winds up in adult prison with a sentence of 15 years to life. And Edward Humes never hears from him again. So he does conclude at the end, I mean, it's heartbreaking, that out of the 7 kids, 3 of the 7 were, you could say, saved by the system for many different reasons. And he says here, there is no easily identifiable reason for these divergent results. There is little logic to juvenile court successes and failures, but for a bit of luck, a chance encounter with a caring judge or a probation officer or volunteer, or conversely with a tired bureaucrat, an incompetent lawyer, or an inflexible DA. Any one of the 7 kids could have traded places with the others. This is the heartbreak of juvenile court, the wonder of it and the scandal. Heartbreak because every kid cannot be saved. Wonder that this broken, battered, outgunned system saves even one child. Scandal because it so seldom tries to do anything at all. I do think this comes back to if the system is broken, no matter what, as individuals, we can still try our best to give hope, to do what we think is right, and yeah, to connect and to work towards that better vision for the future. Yeah. So even though that student was expelled, I did still meet with him every week to give him his homework and just connect as a human being. He came back to school. He did take the final exams. And the last I heard, he is now a policeman. I don't know how that happened. I left the school a while ago, but my former colleagues called me one day and said, "You will not believe who is coming to give the discipline talk this year." We had this boy who once threw a trash can at the vice principal. So who knows? Yeah, many things happen. Kids grow up too.
So yeah, I your presentation threw me back to many years ago. One of my brothers, when he was a teenager, got into a gang, and he was arrested and went to juvenile hall for assault, and for he was facing assault charges. My understanding is that he'd also been involved in theft, although that's not why he was arrested, but and gang banging, so fighting with other gangs and all that. And this is all while he was in high school. And he was arrested. He went to juvie, and he went on trial. And he was facing I don't know how many years in prison, or in juvenile hall, wherever it is that he was going to end up with. And he, I think he was fortunate in many ways in that he he had a judge that actually was open-minded and willing to give him a chance. So he did not go to jail, but he was giving 5 years probation. And he also had a very good luck in getting a good probation officer, one who was vested in, I think, the improvement of the kids. And working with the probation officers for 5 years, he got out of the gang. He left all of the people that he used to be hanging on with. He finished high school. He went on to college, got a degree in law enforcement, and ever since he graduated, he's been a probation officer working with kids and youth at risk. So there is hope, I think, and sometimes the system does work, and so. Yeah, but there's definitely a lot that can be improved so that we can give hope and a future to all those young kids who all they need is that hope for the future. So anyway, that was my
Thank you, Venerable Jampa.
We are doing the prison outreach here, right? And some of them really have been very, very young when they did their crime or action that brought them into prison, and some in their 20s that we communicate with. And that's really also an anchor for some, when they have access to Buddhism, and we really provide them with everything what we can give, material or advice, and do it regularly, and that's an anchor, that's a hope for them, however long they have to spend, maybe for life even. But focusing on spirituality, they can make the best use of, and Buddhism specifically, make the best use of their life there.